The WAEC certificate issue is up again, with APC and PDP going back and forth on the matter. What is really required to hold a public office in Nigeria is the question. All charges dismissed but arrested in court. What happens to Justice Rita Ofili Ajimogobia now? 5 lawmakers suspended by Imo State House of Assembly have been recalled. This is Plus Politics, and I am Mary Anna Cohen. Festus Keyamo, the Director of Strategic Communications of President Muhammadu Buhari's 2019 presidential campaign, has argued, quote, yes, Section 318 of the 1999 Constitution defines school certificate or its equivalent to mean primary 6 school leaving certificate plus the ability to just speak, write, understand, and communicate in English language to the satisfaction of INEC. No WAEC certificate is needed. Well, I have in the studio Enwela Mustafa. He is the Lagos Secretary, Liberation Movement, with me in the studio. Good evening. It's good to have you join us. Yeah, I also have joining me Adeni Ikunu. He's a political analyst. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now, this is a situation that has been on and off, you know, picked up when it's convenient for these politicians, and they always have a drag about it. Festus Keyamo and Reno Mockery also had a dirty fight on Twitter. I'd like to quote some of the tweets. Okay. Festus Keyamo, of course, said, by definition, school certificate or its equivalent, it's in Section 318 of 1999 Constitution, means you do not need a certificate to become a president or governor. But if you present a forged WAEC or other certificates to INEC or any office, you will be disqualified. Now, Reno Mockery replies and says, APC took Senator Adeleke to court, alleging that he had no certificate. Now, a shameless Festus Keyamo is arguing that M. Buhari does not need the same certificate. It seems like potato. I'll start with you.
Okay, well, I think to start with, I think that generally criteria for electing public officers in Nigeria, I think it should be checked over and over again. Now, if Festus Keyamo is saying that the president, for you to be a president of the country, you don't need the WAEC certificate, I'm surprised to hear that, because of course, the issue of Osun State is still very clear, it's still very recent. Now, the case of Osun State is that Adeleke was not probably disqualified for not having a certificate. I think he was disqualified for forgery, or forging one. Now, but the case of President Muhammadu Buhari is not coming as the president for this is the second time, and he has contested over and over before he eventually won the last ticket. But then I feel that as a country, we need to look at the criteria that are public officers, particularly the educational qualifications. We need to look at it holistically, and because I mean we can't continue to have this issue of certificate today, no certificate tomorrow. I know that these things happen probably as a matter of which hunting from different parties. One party comes out to start to talk about another party not having a certificate. Of course, in the first place, President Muhammadu Buhari would not have been president in the first place if he does not have a WAEC certificate.
I will come back to you on that. Adeni,
Yes, please.
what do you make of this? Because it seems like whether it's the APC or the PDP, they seem to be talking from both sides of their mouth.
Well, I like to teach Festus Keyamo something very little here. When you refer to what they give you after you finish your primary school, it's called First School Living Certificate. So that actually puts paid to whatever legal gymnastics that Festus Keyamo is trying to perform there. And it is pretty ridiculous because, as my friend said, he referred to the case in Osun State, which is what we must not forget because the matter is still ongoing. So when people are spokespersons to the president, you should be able to advise your principal about the things he shouldn't do and the things he should do. Let's also not forget that as of the time the president rounded off his O levels, as it were, they didn't have such material online. And that's why last year he was issued a certificate and it was actually presented to the eyes of everybody. So it more or less contradicts even the current stand of what we have, because the president has been issued a certificate by West African Examination Council, as it were. Very obvious. So it is beginning to be some kind of ridicule that the spokesperson perhaps doesn't have current and sufficient information on what obtains with his principal. That said, I think it is equally of importance to do a proper review of the conditions of coming into office. Because if Nigeria, a leading nation in Africa and a contributor to world progress, can have its president elected on the grounds of having the least of qualification, then it calls to question the reality of the kind of democracy we even practice.
Is it really the democracy's problem, or is it the Constitution's problem? Because
It
the
is
Constitution...
as we speak, the president that occupies the saddle is the reason for the contention in a democracy. So before we even go to the Constitution, which is an uphill task to review, we have to talk about the man in the eye of the storm.
But the Constitution allows an SSCE or
We didn't, let me say this again, because we are here to tell the viewing public. A certain Professor Yududa put together this material called the Constitution. And there's a misconstrued part in the opening page where it was said that we the people, I think that's the biggest lie in the grand norm of this country, Nigeria. Nigeria didn't have, as of the time Obasanjo was released from prison to go to Asurok, a functional and available constitution. So they put that together, which obviously was more or less a report from certain conferences, certain committees, certain write-up. So they put it together, let's have a document. If you look at that constitution very carefully, you'd find out that it is skewed ab initio because it's a product meant to serve the interests of certain segments of the population. And that is the contention. So the Constitution now will eventually be reviewed, but what is of importance is to address the critical issues that has brought us here, which is the fact that the president's certificate has been reasons for lots of disputation. In fact, the matter is sub judice because the appeal filed by the PDP has included that the president needs to answer questions regarding his wife's certificate.
Back to you, because I think, Adeni, you just stole my thunder. You made mention of stuff about the president's certificate, and he also said that at the time, there was no WAEC as it is today. But every school does have some form of record, be it written or printed out or laminated. Every school, I'm sure. I mean, I went back to my primary school, maybe I think how many years later, to get my first school leaving certificate. So every school should have a written material, if not typed with a typewriter, saying, Mr. President went through that school and wrote an SSCE or Cambridge or whatever it was at that time. But there wasn't. I remember in the middle of all of that contention, there was none until now, where the certificate is being issued. But does that make it authentic? Can we really say that this result is a reflection of what had happened if Mr. President sat for an examination? Because the PDP is really calling Mr. President out on this. And they're doing this on the premise that they also have a candidate who is also hanging on the balance because the APC has called him out saying, look, you don't even have a certificate, so you cannot, sit in this office. Yes, the court has said you are legitimate, you are the man who's supposed to be governor, but you do not have the certificate. So again, do we have to cure the Buhari certificate issue before we get to the Adeleke issue? What do we do? Like you said, they're two different things, but are they really?
Well, if we trace back to when President Muhammadu Buhari was probably finished from the primary school, well, I don't think that there was much record-keeping schools then, because what we had then, you can't compare it to what we have now, because the level at which we have devices where we store information and what we have then and now is quite different.
But there are generals like him who were in the army who have their certificates. So is it just his school that did not keep records?
Well, I think this needs to take us back to the usual record keeping that schools should normally do. When Buhari passed out from school back in those days, of course, I don't expect them to. I don't even think there was anything called a laminating machine then. That's the honest truth. But of course, the schools he passed out from still exist. If the schools can establish to us that yes, he finished from this school, and I mean they can show records, even if it's in black and white or in one old paper that people can see, then. But of course, I think that can still carry maybe a little weight. But then, if the schools didn't say that he didn't pass through the school and they don't have any record of him passing through that school, then that brings us to the fore to say that his candidacy is questionable.
There is a certain power that you wield when you are the #1 person in office, especially in this part of the world where you get a WAEC to present you a certificate, even if you were not, even if you didn't write WAEC per se. Could a school principal also, fall under that category of saying, well, yes, he was a good student, but that school principal is not necessarily the examiner?
Well, let me say that the examiner will really oversee such examination. Let's also understand the dynamics that play out. When you do your primary school examination, at times some people say you have to write the common entrance, but it is the school that eventually offers you that particular certificate. So powers are within the purview of the headmaster or the headmistress for the primary school to issue the certificate. But it's very unfortunate the person who was headmaster then had died. So importance now has to deal with the records that people should keep with respect to the things we do. Let me say this. I think it is peculiar with many African countries that we do not value records. For instance, if you look at the Inferno in Notre Dame in France, many persons would have said, what is the essence of the Gothic cathedral? But the sense of history remains an integral part of any nation that must grow, because history is reflected upon so that it can be properly guided and understand how your people have evolved over the years. Over time. Because we don't value such important abstract, we believe that it is a needless concrete, and that is why we don't keep records. And I must say here again that our constitution is so defective that many persons that have taken their time to study it have decided to be very frivolous, either in filing petitions or in just trying to be very skillful at avoiding the needed gavel to be smashed against them when they indeed do wrong. And that is why whatever we discuss here today, it must go to the point where we start talking about the essence of addressing that skewed document that has continued to give certain persons some advantage over other segments of the populace. Because if we do not do that, another Buhari scenario will play out, another Keyamo scenario will play out, another PDP APC logjam will play out, and the citizenry will suffer for it.
As Reno Mockery was going at it with Festus Keyamo, he said, you don't need a certificate to become president, Keyamo, and you are surprised Nigeria became the world headquarters for extreme poverty under Buhari. What do you expect with such poor mentalities as displayed by the likes of Festus? Of course, they were taking jabs at each other. But you talked about the loopholes in our constitution,
yes,
and I'm coming back to you.
In a document foisted upon us.
Well, yes. There have been, under the Jonathan administration, if I'm not, during the Jonathan administration, there was an attempt to have town hall meetings or meetings with members of certain constituencies and senatorial districts in order to help members of the National Assembly see where we can amend our constitution. We had hopes that there was going to be a constitutional amendment, but that hope just went with the wind. And I'm wondering to myself, what happened? How come we Nigerians are not pushing for a constitutional amendment? Why do we wait for our lawmakers to make these amendments when we all know that these laws sometimes favor them?
Yeah, well, as it is, that's why we elect the lawmakers to make these laws. But at the end of the day, we the citizens can only cry out to let them know that this is how it's meant to be. We all have seen what is obtainable in other African countries, where things slightly work than what we have in Nigeria. Just the honest truth is, our constitution, as it were today, needs to be reviewed.
How do we review it? That's the question. Why are we not asking the right questions?
All right.
Why are we not pushing?
Can I interject here? I'm sorry. Now, let me say this, that for any constitution to be reviewed, it has to go through all the levels, from the federal constituents down to the respective state assemblies. Do not forget that they wanted, at the last time, for local governments to even have autonomy. The lawmakers didn't allow it to happen. It's rather unfortunate that even Lagos strongly opposed to the independence of the local government. The autonomy was completely denounced, discountenanced, rejected by Lagos lawmakers that you'd expect to be progressive with respect to having arms of government properly structured so that they can function. Let us also say this, that they're talking about restructuring. Restructuring was part of the reviews that the lawmakers completely rejected, because obviously when you have a federal Senate of 109 and maybe 80 says no and the rest says yes, obviously it's about 2/3 majority. There's nothing you can do. So I must say here that it begins with people making a decision. Perhaps if we have to make them sign certain contract before they go to office, that you can't go there and do contrary to what will serve the people. Let's also say this, that we have what is called the Citizens' Bill. Every citizen has the right to put something together that at least can be forwarded. There are procedures. And when you put it forward, the lawmakers themselves can actually look into it. But we have to speak as a unit. You cannot have those from the southeast say that they want restructuring, those from the north say that they don't want it. It will mean that you don't have a unified voice when such issues are brought before the lawmakers, and that jettisons its purpose ab initio.
But it could also be that these same lawmakers who were trying to get in line are somewhat capitalizing on the fact that we are we have different variations of what we want as per restructuring. Just as you said, the North might not want restructuring because their leaders are saying, we don't need restructuring. Everything is fine the way it is.
You know what? I spoke with, I did an investigative interaction with somebody who had fought at the troubled regions of the Northeast. That's last week. He revealed to me that if you say that there should be restructuring, that even the Christians of the North will not agree, because we don't understand the structure of the North enough for us to just make them feel it's about North-South dichotomy. That even up north, the Christians up north wouldn't want you to feel that is it. He said, for instance, a place like Borno is about 50-50 Christians and Muslims. He said there are some places in the north where you even have more Christians than Muslims, but we always think that everything is about Muslims.
Well, but should it be shouldn't it be firstly about us as a nation before we bring in religion and ethnicity? Isn't that the reason why we are where we are?
Let's not deceive ourselves. Croatia is over 4 million. It is a country. There are countries, we have Mauritius, we have Seychelles. This country, you can split Lagos into 4 or 5, and you have their population. Kenya is the giant of East Africa. Its population is 48 million. My position is, you have to come to terms with the peculiarity of your people. And that is why you have to respect what the people want.
Are we ever going to achieve a constitutional conference of sorts? Will we ever be able? Because we cannot make any headway if we do not have an agreement. Are we ever going to get there? Yeah. Because we just can't keep talking about these issues if we're not really going to bring ourselves down to the nitty-gritty of actually coming together and forming a synergy?
Well, for us to actually achieve a country that works, or a country where we all aspire to see in the next future, well, I think there should be lots of interactions going on between the people who are those at the receiving end. That's the common man, and those are the helms of affairs. Of course, I think any responsible government should organize a town hall meeting every other time at different levels of the government to engage people on what we think that can really make our constitution a working one. Because it is today, what we have today in that constitution is that type that favors some sect of people and does not favor some sect of people. And it's very, and you know, the funny thing is, it's very funny how these politicians actually tweak these things to favor them as at the time they want it. But like I said, a country like Kenya, with a population of 48 million people. I was in Kenya last week, and with the level of development, Kenya is a population of 48 million. The level of development that they have there and what we have in Nigeria is quite different, and it's really sad because Nigeria has more resources. We have all it takes to be a bigger country and a better country, but it seems that there's something wrong with our leaders. But I think that if we continue to cry out and we continue to engage these people, yes, we have elected them into office. It doesn't end there. We need to let them, constantly remind them of what their mandates are and what they need to do to make things work in Nigeria as a country.
Well, I'm wondering how we're going to do that when we can't even come out to vote on a normal day.
Well, you have to give people reason to participate in the electoral process of your country. You have to build trust. You have to build confidence.
Asked people to come and pick their PVC. They never showed up.
It is not enough for INEC to come out 6 months to every 4 years election to tell people to come out and pick their people. Now elections are over.
I'm just even saying, but if we're that concerned, can we not meet each other halfway?
No, you can't.
Why do we always look for who to place the blame on? It is an agency saddled with the responsibility to ensure that elections are free, fair, and credible, and there's a law that makes that tripod stand. And that is why, after every election, INEC should understand that its role includes not just continuous voter registration, but continuous voter education. You have to educate the people up until the time that elections are near. You have to make people understand that they have a role to play in the affairs of those who govern them. So if you don't do all those things, then you would have even lower turnout than we've always had. Well, I don't know. Where do we go from here? Well, I've been speaking with Enwela Mustafa. He is the Lagos Secretary, Liberation Movement, and Adeni Ikunu, a political analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for speaking.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be going to Imo State to find out what's really going on there. Apparently, the lawmakers that were somewhat shown the butt of the gun have been recalled. What's that about? And of course, the judge and the EFCC. We'll be right back. It's still Plus Politics.